The president said yesterday that the Assad regime, or Assad himself, should be held accountable. Will you support his application to stand in front of the ICC as a war criminal who committed crimes against humanity?
So we support the work of the ICC. I know that obviously we have disagreed with their hold on. Let me address it.
You support the work of the ICC until they do something about it.
So we have had a long. Let me just answer the question. You know what, Matt? Let me answer the question, because I was addressing that before you interrupted me. We obviously have had a jurisdictional dispute with them, as it relates to cases against Israel. That is a long-standing jurisdictional dispute. But that said, we have also made clear that we support broadly their work, and we have supported their work in other cases, despite our jurisdictional dispute when it comes to Israel. But that said, when it comes to Assad, I suspect that before you ever get to the ICC, the people of Syria are probably going to want him to return home and stand judgment for his crimes in Syria.
He's not going to return home. I mean, these are Russians under the Russians' protection.
I doubt that he's going to. I mean, if he's not going to return home from Russia, I doubt he's going to transfer himself to The Hague, leaving Russian protection
but
either.
My
point being, should he ever decide he's willing to face accountability, or should the Russians decide that they don't want to continue to harbor a war criminal, there may be a whole range of people in line to hold him accountable for his actions.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about the Caesar Act, but do you think that the U.S. is undermining the trust of the international community in organizations like the ICC and ICJ by making an exception for Israel when trying to convince us that Assad and the like of Assad should be brought in front of the
so again, I think it takes too narrow a view of the ways in which he could be held accountable for his crimes by just focusing on the ICC. Because I do suspect that whatever comes out of the wake of the past 48 hours, you will see a demand by the Syrian people that he return to Syria and face justice for his crimes, and that would be the court of first jurisdiction before you even get to the ICC. Okay, so that's true. But when it comes to the overall question, I know we have a disagreement with other countries around the world, but this has been a long-standing, good faith disagreement about where the ICC has jurisdiction and where it does not, based on the fact that there is no recognized Palestinian state.
Okay, but that was the norm, because this is what happened with Rwanda, this is what happened with ex-Yugoslavia, etc. Final question, the Caesar Act sanctions is going to expire on December 20th, I believe. Do you think that this should be expired now, that the regime is no longer there?
I don't have any announcements on that act today. We're going to continue to watch what happens and make our decisions moving forward based on it. Syria?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about the U.S. alliance with Kurdish forces in Syria, and how does the U.S. support for SDF look like after the fall of the Assad regime?
There has been no change in our posture with respect to support for the SDF. They continue to be a vital partner in the fight against ISIS, and they will continue to be so.
Okay. Going back to U.S. engagement with some of these Syrian rebel groups, yesterday a senior administration official talking to reporters said U.S. is in touch with some of them. Can you explain which ones? And given that HTS is designated and there is a bounty on Jolani's head, is that a 100% impediment for you guys to even indirectly engage with them, or not really?
So as a legal matter, no, it is not. We do have the ability to engage with organizations that have been designated. You might remember that the previous administration engaged with the Taliban while it was a designated terrorist organization, and struck an agreement to withdraw from Afghanistan with the Taliban while the Taliban was a designated terrorist organization. So we do have the ability, when it is in our interest legally, to communicate with a designated terrorist organization. There are things you can't do under the law, but talking with people is not one of them. When it comes to engagement with groups on the ground in Syria, so we have a number of ways of communicating, sometimes directly with various groups, sometimes with intermediaries, either inside Syria or outside Syria. We have been engaging in those conversations over the past few days. The Secretary himself has been engaged in conversations with countries that have influence inside Syria and will continue to do that, but I'm not going to get into the details of those conversations. I will say that there are a couple of key points that we are emphasizing in all of those conversations. One is that we want to see de-escalation moving forward. We don't want to see any organization take advantage of this situation to try and improve their own position, to try and improve their own standing inside Syria. We want to see ultimately a political reconciliation and a political path forward that answers the interests of the Syrian people, not the narrow interests of any one of the various organizations that are active militarily inside Syria.
Right. Is the U.S. government trying to engage with Jolani himself?
I'm going to make it a rule while we are in this period of somewhat uncertainty to not try to read out all the conversations that we have one by one with various actors inside Syria. But I can tell you that we believe we have the ability to communicate one way or the other, directly or indirectly, with all the relevant parties, and we will make clear the interests that I just outlined, both in the top of my remarks and in response to your previous question. We will be making clear that those are the interests of the United States and what we believe are the interests of the Syrian people that we want to see.
Regarding the Israel strikes on Damascus, you mentioned the importance of destroying chemical weapons stockpiles, but is the U.S. certain that is Israel actually really targeting the chemical weapons, but nothing else? Because there were some reports saying that Israel, in the buildings Israel targeted in Damascus was Assad's intelligence office, for instance. Is the U.S. aware of this?
I don't have any assessment of their strikes. They'll have to speak to them.
And one more on this. Regional countries such as Egypt, Jordan, and Qatar condemned Israel's seizure of Golan Heights. Actually, we just had a fragile ceasefire agreement recently in Lebanon. And are you not concerned about Israel's actions like occupation of Golan Heights and these attacks on Damascus, which regional countries also perceive as a provocation?
So I already spoke to the situation on the border. I don't have any further comment on that. But of course, if you look at what we are trying to achieve here, we are trying to achieve de-escalation and stability.
And we Israel serve that purpose?
I know, but I'm just saying, ultimately, we believe it is in the interests of all the countries in the region, including Israel, that you have stability in Syria, stability in Lebanon, that will help produce stability in the broader region, and that is what we are trying to accomplish and what we try to encourage all these parties when discussing their actions with them. Yeah. Next, Eva.
Yeah, on Manbij and also SDF. As you mentioned, that the SDF is a vital partner in fighting against ISIS, but this partner, the US partner in the region, are distracted because of the Syrian National Army attacks in Manbij and Kobane. Even as we are speaking, there are reports about attacks in Kamishla. So have you tried to reach Turkey, as they are backing these groups, to stop these attacks on SDF in the region?
We have discussed this with Turkey and with a number of other countries in the region, and we have made clear what you heard me say in response to a previous question, which is that we want to see de-escalation. We don't want to see any party try and take advantage of the situation.
And there are a number of US senators, including Senator Chris Van Hollen and also Senator Lindsey Graham. They said that the US should not guard down, and also they should
not
guard down. They should not rest, and they should support the Kurds in fighting against ISIS and also protect them from the attacks from other groups. So, are you calling stop these attacks from Syrian National Army?
As I just said, we want to see a de-escalation across the board. Wrap for today.
Good afternoon. Christians in Syria, other religious minorities there, with HTS now in control, how will their religious freedom be monitored by the U.S.?
Well, this goes to exactly what I was speaking of when I said we're going to judge HTS by its actions, as we will judge every group inside Syria by their actions. And one of the foremost things that we want to see protected in Syria are the rights of religious and ethnic minorities.
if I may ask another, the head of the Latin Church in Syria, the apostolic vicar there in Aleppo, is calling for the lifting of economic sanctions on Syria, saying, quote, "They have devastated ordinary people," end quote. Your reaction?
So I spoke to sanctions a number of times over the briefing. I don't have anything new to say on it.
And a separate subject, on the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception yesterday, Pope Francis urging for a ceasefire on all war fronts across the globe by Christmas. Does the State Department support that urging?
So there are a number of conflicts where we are trying to get a ceasefire, of course, the conflict in Gaza, the conflict of Sudan. But when you look at, say, for example, the war between Russia and Ukraine, that's ultimately a decision for Ukraine to make. I think when you, like if you look at Ukraine has the right to defend itself. I don't think you're going to see Russia heed the Pope's calls and unilaterally disarm. So as long as Ukraine is under attack, we'll continue to support their right to defend themselves. But of course, speaking broadly, of course we want to see the end to conflicts. So we want to see conflicts resolved. That doesn't mean in every case an immediate ceasefire. If it would cause parties to give up their duly held rights, but we do want to see wars resolved and peace brought to the world.